They know you bought that cake, ma'am.
The slap of truth often comes quietly, not with a hand, but with a whisper that shatters everything you thought you knew. I was paying for a cake at the grocery store when the cashier, an older man in his 60s, suddenly took my arm. His eyes held an intensity that made me deeply uncomfortable, and he leaned in to whisper something directly in my ear. His words hit me like an unexpected blow, something about my son and his family that left me completely paralyzed. Before we go on, do not forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We bring you new stories every day. Hit like and let us know what city you are watching from in the comments. I could not believe what I had just heard. The man let go of my arm and continued scanning groceries as if nothing unusual had happened. But I stood there, the receipt trembling in my hand, trying to process the words that were now swirling in my head. I walked out the back entrance of the store. I needed fresh air and time to think. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it hammering in my ears. Was it possible that what this stranger had told me was true, or was it just a misunderstanding? From someone who did not really know my situation, I decided to hide behind some trash dumpsters near the parking lot. From there, I could observe without being noticed. If what I had heard was true, I would soon know it with my own eyes. My name is Marjorie Penn. I am 67 years old, and all my life I have worked hard to keep my family together. I live alone in a modest apartment downtown on a pension that barely covers the most basic bills. Every month I count the dollars several times before deciding what to spend them on, always prioritizing the needs of others before my own. My only son Cyrus married Dahlia 3 years ago. From the very beginning, I found her to be a little distant, but I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, thinking it might just be shyness. Over time, however, I started to notice strange things about her behavior, though I never said anything because I did not want to create conflict in my son's marriage. Dahlia's family had always been very cordial with me, especially her father, Wendell. But there was something in their eyes that never sat right with me. They were always talking about how difficult their financial situation was, how they struggled to make ends meet, and without hesitation, I would try to help them whenever I could. From my hiding spot, I had a perfect view of the grocery store's main entrance. Cyrus was waiting for me in the car, but now I had a clear sight of everything. The cashier's words echoed in my mind, again and again, like an unceasing sound. Barely 2 minutes had passed when I saw something that made me doubt everything I thought I knew about my daughter-in-law's family. Wendell, Dahlia's father, walked out the main entrance carrying bags that looked quite heavy, but they were not ordinary grocery bags. They were from a high-end store I only knew by sight, a place I had never had the resources to shop at. The store's name shimmered in gold on the black bags he carried with a casual ease, as if it were a perfectly normal thing for him. My heart began to beat faster. Wendell walked to a car parked just a few feet from where I was hiding. It was not the old, worn-out car they always complained about when asking for help. It was a brand-new, gleaming vehicle, a light color that shone under the afternoon sun. The tires looked brand new, and the paint did not have a single scratch. I watched him open the car's trunk and carefully place the bags inside, like someone protecting something valuable. Then he took out his phone and started talking to someone. Although I could not hear the conversation, his body language was relaxed, like that of a person with no urgent financial worries. At that moment, I remembered all the times Dahlia had called Cyrus asking for help. It was always the same story. They could not pay the rent. They needed help with Wendell's medical expenses. They could not afford enough food for the week. And my son, with his kind heart, always found a way to send them something. But what I was seeing with my own eyes did not match those stories of desperate need at all. The expensive bags, the new car Wendell's relaxed demeanor, everything seemed to completely contradict the version they had been telling us for months. A cold sensation began to spread through my body, like when you sense that something very bad is about to happen. The cashier's words were starting to make sense, though I still resisted believing them completely. Could it be possible that my daughter-in-law's family had been lying to us this whole time? Wendell ended his call and headed back towards the grocery store entrance. He seemed to be looking for something or someone. His eyes scanned the parking lot carefully, as if to make sure no one had seen him. That cautious attitude seemed very suspicious to me. I decided to stay hidden a little longer. My gut told me there was more to discover, and after what I had seen, I could not simply ignore the situation. I needed to be completely sure before I talked to Cyrus about this. As I remained hidden, I began to remember how I had gotten to this point. That morning, I had woken up with a mix of excitement and nervousness. It had been months since I had visited Dahlia's family, and I wanted to make a good impression by bringing something special to share. I went to my small kitchen and opened the jar where I kept my savings. Counting those coins had become a painful yet necessary ritual. I separated the wrinkled bills and coins I had been saving for weeks, sacrificing small pleasures like a coffee at the bakery or a magazine at the newsstand. I had exactly $43. It was not much, but I had decided to use 20 of it to buy a decent cake at the neighborhood bakery. The rest I needed for my expenses the next week, mainly to buy my medications and some basic groceries. I showered with care and chose my best dress, the one I saved for special occasions. It was a simple but clean dress that made me feel presentable. I styled my hair, trying to hide the gray strands that were more noticeable every single day, and put on the fake pearl earrings my late mother had given me so many years ago. Before leaving, I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I saw a 67-year-old woman who had worked her whole life, who had raised her son alone after being widowed, and who was now trying to keep a family together that seemed to value money more than feelings. Cyrus arrived to pick me up exactly on time. My son had always been punctual, a quality I admired in him. When I got in his car, I noticed he seemed a little tense, but I thought maybe it was nervousness about the family visit. During the ride, we talked about unimportant things. He told me about his office job, about some minor problems he had had with his boss, but he avoided talking about Dahlia or her family. That seemed strange to me, because he normally kept me informed about how things were going in his marriage. When we arrived at the area where Dahlia's family lived, I asked him to stop at the grocery store. I wanted to buy a fresh cake to go with lunch. Cyrus offered to go in with me, but I told him I preferred to go alone, that I would not belong. The bakery inside the grocery store had several cakes available. I chose a simple vanilla cake, nothing extravagant but presentable. It cost exactly $18, $2 less than I had budgeted, which made me happy because it meant I could buy a small greeting card. It was also in the checkout line that everything happened. The cashier, a man who seemed to be my age, served me normally until he saw the name on the credit card I tried to use first. The card was rejected, as I expected, because I knew I did not have sufficient funds. Then I took out the cash. It was at that moment that the man looked at me more closely, whispered my name, Marjorie Penn, and asked me if I was Cyrus's mother. When I confirmed that I was, his expression changed completely. He looked worried, almost scared. What he told me, after grabbing my arm, was something I will never be able to forget. though at that moment I refused to believe it. His words were direct and painful. He told me that my daughter-in-law's family came to that grocery store regularly, spending hundreds of dollars on imported products and premium meats, while at the same time he knew they were constantly asking my son for money. He explained that he knew the situation because Wendell had mentioned several times with a certain pride how my son helped them financially every single month. The cashier told me he had seen Wendell buy bottles of wine that cost more than I spent on food for an entire week. He also told me that Dahlia frequently bought expensive beauty products and designer clothes they're always paying in cash. He told me it seemed unfair that a family who gave themselves those kinds of luxuries was taking advantage of the generosity of a hard-working son and his elderly mother. The man explained that he had decided to talk to me because he had seen me carefully counting my coins to pay for a simple cake, while they spent freely, without a care, on luxury items. He told me that his own mother had gone through a similar situation and that he regretted not having acted in time. After hearing this, I left the grocery store completely confused. My mind refused to fully process what I had heard. For years, I had trusted the word of Dahlia and her family. I had watched my son worry about them work extra hours to send them money, and I myself had contributed with the little I had on several occasions. But the cashier's words had planted a seed of doubt that was growing rapidly in my heart. That is why I decided to hide and observe. I needed to see with my own eyes if what I had been told was true, because the consequences of that information were far too serious to act on based on rumors alone. From my hiding spot behind the dumpsters, I could see everything happening in the parking lot perfectly. The smell of garbage was not pleasant, but it was a small price I was willing to pay to discover the truth about the people I had trusted for so long. When I saw Wendell come out of the grocery store with those expensive bags, my heart tightened in my chest. The bags were from a store I knew only by its reputation for extremely high prices. A single purchase there could cost me a whole month's grocery budget. Wendell walked with the confidence of someone who has no financial worries. His clothes were new, his shoes shined, and his watch looked expensive, even from where I was hiding. Nothing about his appearance suggested the desperate poverty they always talked about. The car he put the groceries in was definitely new. The paint gleamed under the sun, and the tires looked freshly bought. I mentally calculated that a vehicle like that could cost more money than I had seen put together in my entire life. How was it possible that someone who had a car like that would need constant financial help? As I watched him talk on the phone, I noticed that his conversation was relaxed, even cheerful. It did not seem to be the call of someone worried about financial problems. His body language was that of a satisfied person, comfortable with his situation. At that moment, all the small inconsistencies I had noticed over the past few months began to make sense. The times Dahlia had casually mentioned expensive restaurants where she had eaten, justifying it as invitations from friends. The comments about new clothes she had supposedly gotten on incredible sales. The social media photos that showed a lifestyle that did not match their constant requests for help. Wendell ended his phone call and started walking back towards the grocery store entrance. His movements were confident, unhurried, like someone who had all the time in the world. That gave me the chance to analyze his appearance and behavior better from my hiding spot. Not only were his clothes new, but they were of very good quality. The shirt he was wearing had that perfect cut you only get at specialty stores, and his pants were impeccably ironed. Even his shoes, which I could see better as he got closer to my position, seemed to be genuine and expensive leather. While I was waiting to see what else would happen, I heard voices coming from my right. Two elderly women were talking as they pushed their shopping carts toward their cars. At first, I did not pay attention, but when they mentioned Dahlia's name, my ears perked up immediately. "Did you see the new dress Dahlia was wearing at the mall yesterday?" One of them, a woman with gray hair who looked my age, said. "It must have cost at least $200. I saw an identical one in that expensive store on the second floor." The other woman, who was thinner and wore glasses, responded with a knowing tone. "And that is not all, Gladys. I also saw her buying beauty products at that French store. My granddaughter works there and told me that Dahlia is a frequent customer. She spends as if money were raining from the sky." My heart started beating faster. These women were talking about the same Dahlia who constantly told my son they did not have money for basic expenses. The same one who had called last week asking for help to buy medicine for her father. Gladys continued, "What strikes me most is how she is always buying new things, but then goes around the neighborhood saying they are going through very difficult financial times. My friend Wendell works at the bank and told me the deposits they receive do not match the story of poverty they are telling at all." "Oh, Gladys, but that is gossip," the other woman replied, though in a tone that suggested she had her own doubts. "Although I must admit it seems strange to me that they can afford the rent on that big house if they are really as bad off financially as they say." Gossip. My daughter lives on the same block as them and tells me that almost every week delivery trucks with groceries from the most expensive grocery store in the city arrive. Purchases that any of us would take months to be able to afford. The two women continued walking away as they talked, but I could hear a few more fragments of their conversation. They mentioned something about parties Dahlia's family had recently organized. Parties with abundant high-quality food, imported wines, and expensive decorations. Every word I heard was like a stab in my heart. For months, I had been feeling sorry for that family, worrying about their well-being, asking my son to help them when he could, and even contributing my own small savings on several occasions. I remembered the time Dahlia had called me directly crying on the phone, telling me they needed urgent help to pay for Wendell's doctor. She had told me they had to choose between buying medicine or food, and that they did not know what to do. That night I could not sleep thinking about their suffering. The next day I had gone to the bank and withdrawn $150 from my emergency savings money I had been saving for a possible medical emergency of my own, but which I decided to give her because I could not bear the thought of them suffering when I could help. Now listening to these women talk about that same family's luxurious lifestyle, I felt like the most foolish woman in the world. How could I have been so naive? How had I not seen the signs that were apparently obvious to the whole neighborhood? Wendell came out of the grocery store again, this time with a smaller bag. He headed back to his car, but this time he stopped to talk to a man who was washing a car near his. I could not hear the conversation, but they both seemed relaxed and friendly. The man Wendell was talking to wore work clothes, but you could tell he respected Wendell. His body language suggested that Wendell was someone of a certain status in the neighborhood, someone who commanded respect, possibly because of his financial situation. After a few minutes, I saw Wendell hand the man something. From my distance, it looked like money. Several bills that he handed over without apparent effort. If they were truly going through financial difficulties, as they said, how could he afford to give money to strangers so easily? At that moment, my phone vibrated. It was a text message from Cyrus asking me what had happened, why I was taking so long at the grocery store. I had completely forgotten about him, still waiting for me in the car, probably worried about my delay. I quickly replied that I was on my way out, that I had been in a very long line. A lie. Lying to my own son hurt, but I needed more time to process everything I had seen and heard. I could not get back to his car and tell him my suspicions immediately without more evidence. As I was writing the message, Wendell said goodbye to the man and got into his car. The engine started with a smooth, powerful sound, confirming that it was a good quality and probably recent vehicle. I watched him leave the parking lot with a tranquility that completely contrasted with the image of financial desperation his family had been projecting. I decided to leave my hiding place and walk toward where Cyrus was. I needed to act normally, at least for now. But my mind was already working, trying to recall all the strange details I had overlooked in recent months, all the small signs that now took on a completely different meaning. When I got to the car, Cyrus looked at me with concern. "Mom, are you okay?" "You look pale," he said as I settled into the passenger seat. "Did it take them a long time to check you out?" "Just the line, son," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. You know how grocery stores are on weekends. But inside, my heart was beating so hard I was afraid he could hear it. Cyrus started the car, and we began heading to Dahlia's family's house. During the ride, I tried to keep up a normal conversation, but my mind was still processing everything I had seen and heard at the grocery store. Every traffic light, every corner we passed, brought me closer to a meeting I now saw in a completely different light. "How has Wendell's job been lately?" I asked my son, trying to sound casual. Last time I spoke to Dahlia, she said things were very difficult for him. Cyrus sighed as he drove. "Yeah, Mom. Dahlia told me her dad had to reduce his work hours because the company he works for is having problems. That is why we have been helping them a little more these past few months." That information did not match at all the relaxed and prosperous attitude I had observed in Wendell just a few minutes earlier. A man who was truly worried about reduced work hours would not be spending money at expensive stores or handing bills to strangers in a parking lot. "And how do you feel about that, son?" I asked, watching his expression in the rearview mirror. "I know you have been working a lot of extra hours lately." "Well, Mom, they are my family now," Cyrus replied in a tone that mixed tiredness with resignation. "Dahlia is my wife, and when you get married, you also marry into the family. If they need help, it is my duty as a son-in-law to help them." His words broke my heart. My son, the kind and hard-working man I had raised, was sacrificing his own well-being for people who, from what I had discovered, were taking advantage of his generosity. How much longer could this situation continue without seriously affecting his own financial stability? We arrived at the neighborhood where Dahlia's family lived. It was a pleasant residential area with well-maintained houses and manicured lawns. It was not the most luxurious neighborhood in the city, but it was definitely not a place where people living in extreme financial difficulties would reside. As Cyrus looked for a place to park, I was able to get a better look at Dahlia's family's house. It was a 2-story building with a well-decorated front lawn and a facade that had been recently painted. The windows had new curtains, and the front door looked like it had been renovated not long ago. "The house looks very well kept," I commented, trying to get more information. "Didn't you tell me they were having trouble paying for some repairs?" "Oh yeah," Cyrus replied as he parked. Wendell managed to get some extra work on weekends to make the most urgent repairs. He has been working a lot to keep the house in good condition. Another story that did not add up. If Wendell were really working extra shifts to survive, How would he have time to go grocery shopping at an expensive store during work hours? And more importantly, how would he have money to spend on luxury goods if everything he earned was supposedly going to house repairs? We got out of the car and walked to the front door. Cyrus was carrying some things he had brought while I carried my cake and a mix of nervousness and curiosity that grew with every step. What would you feel if you discovered people you trusted were secretly living in comfort while asking for your help? Share your emotions. Below, drop a number 1 in the comments if you've ever felt deceived like this. Before we could ring the doorbell, the door opened and Dahlia appeared with a radiant smile. My first impression was one of total shock. Her appearance was completely transformed from the last time I had seen her, just a month ago. She was wearing a dress that was definitely not cheap. The fabric looked to be of excellent quality. The cut was perfect, and the vibrant colors gave her an elegant and sophisticated look. Her shoes were clearly new, with a shine that only freshly bought items have, and her handbag matched the outfit perfectly. But what struck me most was her hair and makeup. She had a professional cut that you only get at expensive salons, with highlights that shimmered in the sunlight. Her makeup was flawless, the kind that requires high-quality products and a lot of time to apply correctly. "Marjorie, what a joy to see you," Dahlia exclaimed, coming in for a hug. As she embraced me, I could smell her perfume, a costly fragrance I recognized because I had once seen its price at a store, and it seemed equivalent to my 2-week food budget. "Hello, Dahlia," I managed to say, trying to hide my surprise. "You look great. That dress is beautiful." "This old dress," she replied with a laugh that seemed a little forced. "I bought it on a clearance sale months ago. You know how it is. When you find good deals, you have to take advantage of them." That explanation sounded exactly like the one the woman at the grocery store had mentioned. There was always a justification for every expensive item. Incredible deals, gifts from friends, second-hand purchases that looked new. How many extraordinary coincidences could one family have? We went into the house and I immediately noticed other details that did not fit with the story of financial difficulties. The living room had been recently redecorated. The furniture was not the same as I remembered from my last visit. There was a new leather sofa that looked expensive, a glass coffee table that gleamed impeccably, and several decorative objects that were definitely not cheap. On the wall was a large flat-screen TV that had not been there before. It was a recent model, one of those that cost several thousand. How could a family in a financial crisis explain the purchase of a luxury television? Dad Look, who came to visit Dahlia, called towards the inside of the house. Wendell appeared from what seemed to be the kitchen, wiping his hands with a towel. When he saw me, his expression changed slightly. There was a flicker in his eyes, as if for a moment he had seen something he did not expect, but he quickly regained his usual smile. "Marjorie, so good to see you," he said, approaching to greet me. "We hope you are hungry, because Dahlia has prepared a delicious meal." It was the same Wendell I had seen at the grocery store just an hour before, but now he was acting as if he had not left the house all day. His clothes were the same, but he had put an apron over his shirt as if he had been cooking. "I brought a cake to go with it," I said, handing him the box. "I hope you like it." "What a lovely gesture," Dahlia exclaimed. "But it was not necessary, Marjorie. You know you are always welcome here without having to bring a thing." As she spoke, I could see over her shoulder into the kitchen. The counters were full of ingredients and utensils that suggested an elaborate culinary preparation. I could make out expensive-looking cuts of meat, fresh, and exotic vegetables, and bottles of imported seasonings. The amount of food they were preparing could easily feed a family for several days, and the quality of the ingredients was noticeably superior to what I could afford to buy for my own meals. "Did you too prepare all this?" I asked, genuinely impressed by the abundance. "Well, we wanted to do something special for your visit," Wendell replied. "You do not get to have Cyrus's mother over every day. Besides, we got some ingredients on sale, so we decided to take advantage." The miraculous sales again. I began to wonder if this family had an extraordinary knack for finding deals, or if these explanations were simply a way to justify expenses they could not honestly explain. Cyrus seemed completely oblivious to my observations. He was chatting animatedly with Dahlia about his job and his plans for the next week. His relaxed attitude confirmed that he really believed the version of reality they had presented to him, but I could no longer ignore the evidence before my eyes. Every detail of that house, every aspect of Dahlia's and Wendell's appearance, every convenient explanation, everything pointed to the same unsettling conclusion. This family was not going through the financial difficulties they claimed to be facing. During lunch, I tried to maintain a normal conversation while discreetly observing every detail that could confirm or disprove my suspicions. The table was set with dinnerware I did not remember seeing before, plates and glasses that seemed to be of good quality, not the kind of utensils someone worried about every penny would use. The food they served was abundant and varied. There were several main courses, elaborate salads, and side dishes that required expensive ingredients. Wendell poured wine into crystal glasses, a wine I recognized from having seen its price at the grocery store, more than $50 a bottle. "This wine is delicious," I commented, trying to get information. "Is it a special brand?" "Oh, this one," Wendell replied with a proud smile. "A friend of mine who works in imports got it for me at a special price. Normally, we could not afford wines like this, but when these opportunities come up, you have to take advantage. There was always a perfect explanation, always a generous friend or an incredible deal that justified every luxury. And I thought of how many revenge stories I had heard where the truth finally surfaced after too many excuses. I was starting to wonder how many generous friends one family could have and how frequent those extraordinary deals could be. While we ate, Dahlia casually mentioned some plans they had for the next month. She talked about a family celebration they were organizing, an event that, as she described it, would require a considerable investment in decorations, food, and entertainment. "Sounds expensive," I said, without thinking my words slipping out. "Expensive," Dahlia laughed. "Well, we have been saving for this for months. Besides, Wendell got an extra job that will help us cover the expenses." I immediately remembered what I had seen at the grocery store just a few hours earlier, Wendell spending money as if he had no worries, buying luxury products, driving a new car. What was the truth about his work situation? "What kind of extra job did you get?" Wendell, I asked directly. For a moment, I saw an expression of discomfort cross his face, as if my question had caught him off guard. But he quickly regained his composure. "Weekend consulting," he replied vaguely. "Nothing too exciting, but it helps supplement the family income." His answer was so general, it could mean anything or nothing at all. A man who was truly doing weekend consulting would probably talk with more specificity about his work, especially when the question came from his son-in-law's mother. During the conversation, I noticed that Dahlia's phone was constantly vibrating. Every time she looked at the screen, she smiled in a way that seemed significant to me. At one point, When she thought no one was watching her, she replied to a message, typing quickly with a look of satisfaction on her face. "Everything okay with the phone?" I asked, with apparent curiosity. "Oh, just some friends organizing a get-together for next week," she replied quickly, putting her phone away. "You know how women are always planning something." But there was something about her expression that did not convince me. The way she had smiled while reading the messages suggested that the content was more meaningful than simple social plans. After lunch, Wendell offered to show me some of the improvements they had made to the house. We walked through different rooms, and in each one, I noticed new or renovated elements. The floors had been recently polished, some walls had fresh paint, and several pieces of furniture had been replaced or rearranged. In the master bedroom, I saw something that particularly caught my attention. On top of the dresser were several shopping bags from expensive stores, some still unopened. The price tags I managed to glimpse showed numbers that seemed exorbitant for a family that was supposedly struggling financially. "Did Dahlia go shopping recently?" I asked, gesturing discreetly toward the bags. "Ah, that," Wendell replied with a nervous laugh. "She found some incredible clearance sales this week. Sometimes it is better to buy things when they are on sale, even if you do not need them immediately." That logic seemed completely contradictory to me. A family that was truly in financial difficulty would not have the luxury of buying things they did not need immediately, no matter how good the deals were. As we returned to the living room, my phone rang. It was a text message from a number I did not recognize. When I opened it, I saw that it was from the grocery store cashier. He had gotten my number somehow and had sent me a photo. The image showed a grocery receipt from just 2 days earlier. The total was over $400, and the list included premium products, imported meats, fresh seafood, expensive wines, specialty cheeses, and several gourmet items. The name on the receipt was clearly Wendell. Along with the photo was a message. "Mrs. Marjorie Penn, I am sorry to bother you, but I thought you should see this. This receipt is from 2 days ago. Your family needs to know the truth." My heart started beating faster. The evidence was there in black and white, a $400 purchase of luxury goods made just 2 days before our visit by the same man who was supposedly struggling to pay for basic expenses. I quickly put my phone away before anyone noticed my expression of shock, but my mind was already working, connecting all the dots I had been observing over the past few hours. We returned to where Cyrus and Dahlia were, who were still chatting animatedly. My son seemed relaxed and happy, enjoying what he thought was quality time with his in-laws. He had no idea of the theatrical performance he was witnessing. "Are you feeling okay, Mom?" Cyrus asked me, probably noticing that my expression had changed. "You look a little pale, just a little tired," I lied. "I am not used to such long outings anymore." Dahlia immediately offered to make me some tea or get me something to make me feel better. Her apparent concern would have been touching if I had not been starting to understand the true nature of her character. For the next hour, I continued to observe and listen, mentally, collecting evidence of every inconsistency, every inexplicable luxury, every convenient justification. The list grew constantly. Dahlia's new clothes, Wendell's car, the well-maintained house, the abundant food, the expensive wine, the shopping bags, the receipt I had received. But what hurt me the most was the realization that this situation had probably been going on for months, perhaps even years. How much money had my son sent to this family? How many sacrifices had he made? And how many had I made to help people who did not actually need help? When we finally said goodbye and left the house, my mind was completely made up. I could not let this farce continue. My son deserved to know the truth, however painful it was. And I had a responsibility to protect him from further manipulation. During the drive back home, Cyrus commented on how nice the visit had been and how well Dahlia's family looked. His words were like daggers in my heart because I knew I would soon have to shatter that happy image with a much darker and more disappointing reality. Yes, they look very well, I replied carefully, choosing my words precisely. Maybe too well for a family that is supposedly going through such severe difficulties. The drive back home was one of the most difficult of my entire life. Every mile we drove took me physically away from the house where I had discovered the truth, but brought me emotionally closer to a decision that would change everything for my family. My mind was a whirlwind of contradictory thoughts, doubts, and a growing sense of indignation that I struggled to keep under control. Cyrus was driving calmly, occasionally whistling a tune that showed his good mood. For him, we had spent a pleasant afternoon with his in-laws, sharing a delicious meal and strengthening family ties. He had no idea that his mother had been collecting evidence of what seemed to be an elaborate and prolonged scam. "Mom," he said as we waited at a traffic light, "I am so glad to see you get along so well with Dahlia's family. I know you had some reservations about our marriage at first, but I think now you can see what good people they are." His words broke my heart. My son, my only son, was being manipulated by people who had turned the exploitation of his generosity into an art. How could I tell him that the people in whom he had placed his trust and his money were probably professional liars? Cyrus began carefully. "Have you ever noticed anything inconsistent in the stories Dahlia tells you about their financial situation?" My son glanced at me briefly before returning his gaze to the traffic. "What do you mean, Mom, inconsistent?" How well I continued choosing my words very carefully. Today I noticed they have a lot of new things in the house. The television, some furniture, Dahlia's clothes, all of that costs a considerable amount of money. Cyrus sighed, and I could see that my comment had hit a nerve. "Mom, I already explained that Wendell has been getting extra jobs. Besides, Dahlia is very good at finding deals and bargains. Not everything that looks new is necessarily expensive. But do you not think it is strange that a family that needs constant help for basic expenses can afford so many luxuries at the same time?" I insisted, trying to keep my tone neutral and non-accusatory. "They are not luxuries," Mom, Cyrus replied, with a touch of defensiveness in his voice. "They are basic needs they have been able to meet thanks to a lot of effort and sacrifice. They bought the TV secondhand. The furniture was a one-time opportunity, and Dahlia's clothes are from clearance sales." Each justification my son repeated was exactly the same one I had heard from Wendell and Dahlia during lunch. It was as if they had rehearsed these explanations to perfection, creating a consistent version of reality that could satisfy almost any uncomfortable question. I decided to try a different approach. "Son, have you seen any receipts or documents that confirm these incredible deals, or have you accompanied Dahlia when she finds these extraordinary bargains?" The question clearly made him uncomfortable. I could see his hands tighten slightly on the steering wheel. "Mom, why all these questions? Dahlia is my wife. If she tells me she got something on sale, I believe her. Marriage is based on trust." His answer confirmed what I had begun to suspect. Cyrus had never seen direct evidence of these supposed deals and extra jobs. He was blindly believing everything they told him because he trusted the people he loved. "Of course, son," I replied softly. "Trust is fundamental in marriage, but it is also important to protect yourself from people who might take advantage of that trust. Are you insinuating that Dahlia and her family are deceiving me? Cyrus asked now, clearly annoyed. Mom, that is a very serious accusation. I am not accusing anyone, I said quickly, realizing I had pushed too hard. I am just expressing some concerns I have as a mother who loves you and wants to see you happy and prosperous. The rest of the trip passed in tense silence. Cyrus was clearly processing my conversation, but I could see from his expression that my words had created more resistance than reflection. It was evident that any criticism towards Dahlia and her family would be received as a personal attack. When we arrived at my apartment, Cyrus helped me out of the car, but his goodbye hug was colder than usual. Mom, he said before leaving, I hope you can give Dahlia's family a chance. They are good people who are doing the best they can in difficult circumstances. I will keep that in mind, son, I replied, knowing he would interpret my response as a promise to be more understanding when in reality it was the opposite. That night, alone in my small apartment, I sat in my favorite armchair with a cup of tea and tried to organize all the thoughts that had been bombarding my mind for the past few hours. I had abundant, circumstantial evidence testimonies from neighbors, personal observations, and even a photo of the $400 grocery receipt. But I also had a son who was completely convinced that his wife and her family were victims of difficult circumstances who deserved his help and compassion. Any direct attempt to confront this belief had resulted in resistance and defensiveness. I took out my phone and looked at the photo of the receipt the grocery store cashier had sent me again. The numbers were indisputable. Over $400 in luxury goods purchased just 2 days before our visit. That amount represented more than I spent on food for an entire month. As I looked at that evidence, I remembered all the times Cyrus had come home stressed after working extra hours to send money to Dahlia's family. I remembered the occasions when I myself had contributed with my few savings, feeling sorry for their supposed desperate situation. The indignation I had been holding back all day finally began to emerge with force. It was not just the money that bothered me, though that was significant. It was the emotional manipulation, the systematic exploitation of my son's good feelings, and the calculated way they had built a web of lies to sustain their lifestyle at our family's expense. It also pained me deeply to realize that they had probably been laughing at us behind our backs. Every time we sent money, every time we worried about their well-being, every time we made sacrifices to help them, they probably saw it as evidence of our naivety and our ease of being manipulated. But what tortured me the most was the question of what to do with this information. I had the evidence, I had the observations, I had the documented inconsistencies, but I also had a son who would refuse to believe anything negative about his wife without absolutely irrefutable proof. If I acted too quickly or too confrontational, I ran the risk of alienating Cyrus and pushing him more towards Dahlia. But if I did not act soon, the manipulation would continue, possibly getting worse over time, and my son would continue to be exploited financially and emotionally. I decided I needed more evidence. Evidence that was so clear and indisputable that even Cyrus could not deny or rationalize it. I could not rely only on observations and suspicions. I needed concrete proof that would reveal the true nature of the people who had deceived my family. That night, before I fell asleep, I made a decision that would change the course of the events that followed. I would not directly confront Cyrus until I had absolutely solid evidence. Instead, I would begin my own discreet investigation, collecting proof that was impossible to deny or explain, with convenient stories about miraculous deals and mysterious extra jobs. The following days were the most difficult I had experienced in many years. Every interaction with Cyrus had become an exercise in self-control, trying to maintain normality, while my mind constantly worked on how to address the situation I had uncovered. The evidence I had collected weighed on my conscience like a burden I could not share. During that week, I received 3 more messages from the grocery store cashier. Each one contained additional information that confirmed and expanded my initial suspicions. He sent me photos of other receipts for purchases made by Wendell and Dahlia in recent weeks, all showing excessive spending on unnecessary and expensive products. One of the photos showed a receipt for over $600, which included 2 bottles of French champagne costing more than $100 each, imported seafood, and several gourmet cheeses. The date on the receipt was the same day Dahlia had called Cyrus asking for urgent help to pay the rent. I also received information from Gladys, one of the women I had heard talking at the grocery store. She had gotten my phone number through a mutual friend and contacted me because she had decided I needed to know more details about the situation. Gladys told me that Dahlia's family had been organizing regular parties at their house events with professional catering and expensive decorations. She described a birthday party for Wendell that had cost, according to the guests' comments, several thousand in food, drinks, and entertainment. Marjorie, she told me during a phone call, my daughter lives on the same block and tells me that delivery trucks with expensive purchases, clothes, appliances, furniture, are constantly arriving. It is not normal for a family that is supposedly in a financial crisis. Each new piece of information made it harder to maintain my silence, but I knew I needed the right moment and circumstances to present all of this to Cyrus in a way that could not be easily dismissed or rationalized. The moment came on a Wednesday night when Cyrus came to visit me after work. He looked especially tired and stressed. When I asked him what was wrong, he told me that Dahlia had asked him for additional money for a medical emergency for Wendell. He needs a minor surgery, Cyrus explained, rubbing his temples with clear signs of tension. The insurance does not cover everything, and they need $200 by Friday. I have been working double shifts all week to be able to get the money together. That was the last straw. $200 for a supposed medical emergency requested by the same family that had spent $600 on champagne and seafood just a few days earlier. I could not let my son sacrifice himself anymore for these elaborate lies. Cyrus, I said, taking his hands in mine, I need to show you something. But before I do, I want you to know that I am doing this because I love you, and because I cannot stand to see you being hurt. I took out my phone and showed him the first photo of the $400 receipt. His eyes widened when he saw the date and the total. But before he could speak, I showed him the other photos I had received during the week. Mom, where did you get this? Cyrus asked, looking at the images with an expression that mixed confusion and denial. And how do you know these receipts are real? I explained my encounter with the grocery store cashier, the conversations I had overheard from the neighbors, and all the observations I had made during our visit. I spoke slowly and carefully, presenting each piece of evidence logically and chronologically. But there has to be an explanation, Cyrus insisted, although his voice no longer sounded as convinced as before. Maybe Wendell had a good month at work, or maybe they received money from another source. Son, I replied gently, these luxury purchases were made on the same days that Dahlia called you asking for help with basic expenses. Does that not seem like too much of a coincidence? I could see the realization starting to sink into his mind. His eyes moved between the photos on my phone and my face, looking for some way to reconcile what he was seeing with what he had believed for so long. Besides, I continued showing him the information I had gotten about the expensive parties. The neighbors have seen how this family really lives. It is not the story of desperate poverty they have been telling you. Cyrus got up from his chair and started pacing my small living room. I could see his mind working, recalling past conversations, broken promises, and small inconsistencies that he had probably ignored or rationalized before. But why would they do this? He finally asked in a voice that sounded completely defeated. Why would Dahlia lie to me about something so important? Because it worked, I replied honestly. Because you have been sending them money regularly without asking questions, trusting their word. For them, you are a reliable source of additional income that they can use to maintain a lifestyle they could not otherwise afford. Tears began to form in my son's eyes. Seeing his pain broke my heart, but I knew it was necessary to free him from this destructive manipulation. How much money have I given them in total? He asked, though he seemed afraid of the answer. We had reached the moment of complete truth. According to what you have told me, over the past few months, probably more than $5,000. And that is not counting the help I have given them myself. The number hit him like a physical punch. $5,000 represented months of extra work, personal sacrifices, and lost opportunities for his own future, all given to people who had been systematically deceiving him. I need to talk to Dahlia, he said finally, with a determination I had not heard in his voice in a long time. I need to confront her with this information and hear her explanation. Are you sure you are ready for that conversation? I asked him. Once you put this information on the table, there will be no turning back. Your relationship will change forever, no matter what her answer is. Cyrus was silent for several minutes, looking at the photos on my phone over and over again. I could see him processing not only the financial evidence, but also the emotional implications of having been deceived by the person he loved. Mom, he said finally, thank you for showing me this. I know it must have been difficult for you to decide whether to tell me or not, but you were right. I needed to know the truth. I hugged him tightly, feeling both relief and worry about what would come next. The truth had finally come to light. But now came the most difficult part, facing the consequences of years of lies and manipulation. What are you going to do now? I asked. I am going home tonight, and I am going to have a very serious conversation with my wife, Cyrus, replied with a firmness he had not shown in months. And depending on what she says, I am going to make some important decisions about our future. Cyrus left my apartment that night with a determination I had not seen in him for months. I stayed awake very late, unable to sleep, wondering how the confrontation between my son and his wife would unfold. I knew the next few hours would be crucial for the future of our family. At 2 a.m, my phone rang. It was Cyrus, and his voice sounded completely different when I answered. There was a mix of pain, anger, and something that also sounded strangely like relief. Mom, he said without preamble, you were right about everything completely. What happened, son? I asked, although from his tone I could already imagine that the confrontation had not gone well for Dahlia. When I got home, I decided to check some things before I talked to her. I went to our room and looked through her things, something I had never done before because I trusted her completely. What I found left me speechless. Cyrus told me that he had found several shopping bags hidden in the closet, all from expensive stores, with receipts that showed hundreds of dollars in expenses for clothes and accessories. He also found jewelry he had never seen Dahlia wear, still with their original price tags. But that was not the worst part, Mom. In her purse, I found a notebook where she had written down all the money she has asked me for over the past 2 years. Every lie, every emergency, every invented story is documented there as if it were a job. My heart sank when I heard this. The situation was even worse than I had imagined. Not only had they been lying about their financial situation, but they had been keeping a detailed record of their scam as if it were a legitimate business. And what else was in that notebook, I asked, although I feared the answer. Plans to ask for more money, Cyrus replied bitterly. She had noted that the next story would be a dental emergency for her mother that would cost $1,800. She also had notes on how to make me feel guilty if I doubted her or asked too many questions. The cold calculation of it all sickened me. They were not mistakes or misunderstandings. It had been a systematic manipulation designed specifically to exploit my good feelings. At that moment, I could not help but think how this real-life ordeal mirrored the kind of revelations one might hear in a revenge audio story where betrayal and truth clash head-on. And when did you confront her with all this, I asked. At first, she tried to deny everything. Cyrus continued. She said the purchases were gifts from friends, that the notebook was just to keep track of household expenses, that I was misinterpreting everything. But when I showed her the photos you had of the grocery store receipts, her strategy changed completely. How did it change? She got furious. She yelled at me that I had no right to go through her things, that my family had never really accepted her, and that it was all your fault for putting ideas in my head. She said, you had always been a meddling mother-in-law who wanted to destroy our marriage. Those accusations hurt, but they did not surprise me. It was typical of professional manipulators to try to turn the situation around and become the victims when confronted with evidence of their lies. But what impacted me most, Cyrus continued, was when she finally admitted the truth. She told me that her family had never been in a financial crisis, that Wendell has a stable job that pays well, and that it had all been a strategy to take advantage of my generosity. She used that word specifically, take advantage. Exactly that word, Mom. She said I was easy to convince and that my family had money that we could afford to share, as if we were responsible for maintaining their luxurious lifestyle. The conversation continued for over an hour. Cyrus told me every detail of the confrontation, every lie that had been revealed, every manipulation that had finally been exposed. The picture that emerged was of a family that had turned deception into a way of life. I also called Wendell during the argument, Cyrus told me. I wanted to hear his version of events. At first, he tried to stick to the original story, but when I told him I already knew the truth, he also admitted everything. And what did Wendell say? He said that they had decided from the very beginning that I was a good match for Dahlia because I had a stable job and a family that could help them financially. He told me it was never personal, that it was just business, as if that made everything acceptable. The coldness of that admission left me speechless. Not only had they deceived my son, but they had seen him from the beginning as a source of income, not as a human being with his own feelings and needs. And what did Dahlia say when her father admitted everything I asked? That was the most revealing part of the whole night, Cyrus replied with a bitter laugh. She got mad at him for ruining the plan. She was not angry because the lies had hurt our marriage, but because her father had confessed and ruined her ability to continue deceiving me. For the next hour, Cyrus told me how he had discovered more details about the extent of the lies. The supposed medical emergencies had never existed. Wendell's work problems were completely fabricated. Even the incredible deals that explained all their luxuries had a simpler explanation. They simply bought what they wanted with the money my son sent them regularly. What hurts me the most, Mom, he told me toward the end of our conversation, isn't just the money I lost. It is realizing that for 2 years of marriage, I never really knew the woman I married. Everything was an act designed to keep me giving them money. "And what are you going to do now, son?" I asked him, although from his tone, I already suspected what his answer would be. "I have already told Dahlia that our marriage is over tonight. There is no way to rebuild trust after such a systematic and calculated betrayal. Tomorrow I am going to start the divorce proceedings. Although I knew it was the right decision, my heart ached for my son. No one deserves to discover that the person they love has been so elaborately deceiving them for so long. I also made it very clear that they will not get another cent from our family," Cyrus continued. "And I told her that if they try to contact you asking for help, you should tell them exactly what I think of their methods." "Of course, son," I assured him, "that family will never again receive help from us," Mom, Cyrus said before hanging up. "Thank you for having the courage to show me the truth. I know it must have been difficult for you to decide whether to tell me or not, especially knowing it would probably destroy my marriage, but you saved me from years more of being used and manipulated." After hanging up the phone, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, processing everything that had happened. The truth had finally come to light, but it had come at a very high cost for my son. His marriage had ended, his trust had been betrayed, and he would have to rebuild his life from scratch. But I also knew that in the long run, the truth would have freed him from a situation that would only have gotten worse over time. Dahlia and her family would never have stopped asking for money. They would never have voluntarily confessed their lies, and they probably would have escalated their manipulations until they had completely drained my son's resources. The months that followed that revealing night were a process of healing and rebuilding for our entire family. Cyrus temporarily moved into a small apartment near his job while he processed the divorce and reorganized his life. I accompanied him every step of the way, offering him the emotional support he needed to overcome the betrayal he had experienced. The divorce process revealed even more details about the magnitude of the deception. Cyrus's lawyers discovered that Dahlia had been hiding significant assets throughout their marriage. She had a secret bank account where she deposited some of the money she received from my son and had been buying valuable items that she then carefully hid to maintain the appearance of financial need. Mom, Cyrus told me during one of our weekly meals, the lawyer calculated that over our 2 years of marriage, I sent them more than $15,000. $15,000 that I could have used to buy a house to invest in my future or to help you when you needed it. The number deeply impacted me. It represented years of my son's honest work, sacrificed for people who had seen him only as a convenient source of easy income. But what made me most proud was seeing how Cyrus had matured through this painful experience. During the legal process, Dahlia and her family tried to contact me on several occasions. Wendell called me, trying to convince me to intercede with Cyrus, promising that they would return all the money and never ask for help again. His pleas sounded desperate, but I had already learned to recognize their manipulations. Wendell. I told him during the last call, I accepted. You had 2 years to be honest with my son. You chose lies, manipulation, and deceit. Now you have to live with the consequences of those decisions. Dahlia also attempted a final effort at manipulation by showing up at my apartment one afternoon unannounced. She was dressed in simple clothes and wore no makeup, trying to project an image of vulnerability and repentance. But I already knew her techniques far too well. Marjorie, she said, with tears that seemed rehearsed, I know we made mistakes, but I really loved Cyrus. This all got out of control, but we never wanted to hurt him. Dahlia, I replied with a calm that surprised even me. Real love does not include systematic lies and calculated manipulation. What you did was not love. It was exploitation disguised as love. She continued to try various approaches. First, the repentant victim, then the desperate wife. After that, the daughter-in-law who just wanted to mend the family relationship. But every strategy she tried only confirmed what I already knew about her true nature. The money you took from my son is not just money, I explained to her. It represented his trust, his future, and his ability to believe in the people he loves. That cannot be returned with apologies or promises. Finally, after more than an hour of failed manipulation attempts, Dahlia showed her true colors. Her expression changed completely, and she told me coldly, I always knew you were the problem in this marriage. Cyrus would have been happy if you had not meddled. Maybe, I replied calmly. But he would have been happy while being deceived and exploited. I prefer him to be temporarily unhappy, but free than happy but used. After that confrontation, I never heard from Dahlia or her family again. According to Gladys, they moved out of the neighborhood a few weeks later, probably to avoid the embarrassment of everyone knowing the truth about their methods. Cyrus's recovery process was gradual but constant. At first, he was angry with himself for having been so trusting. But with time and perspective, he began to understand that his generosity and trust were not weaknesses, but valuable qualities that had been exploited by unscrupulous people. Mom Cyrus told me during a dinner near his new apartment, I have been thinking about everything that happened, and I realize I learned something very important. Generosity must be accompanied by wisdom, and trust must be earned and maintained, not given blindly. With the money he no longer had to send to Dahlia's family, Cyrus was able to start rebuilding his finances. He opened a savings account, began investing in his professional future, and for the first time in years, he could enjoy small luxuries without feeling guilty. He also helped me improve my own situation. He insisted on giving me money to buy some new appliances I needed, and began visiting me more frequently, bringing good quality food that we could share together without worrying about the cost. It is ironic, he reflected one day as we shared a meal he had bought. All this time, I was worried about helping a family that did not need help, while you, who really could have used more support, never asked for anything. That observation deeply moved me. During the years of Dahlia's manipulation, I had watched my son exhaust himself trying to meet constant demands for money, while I remained silent about my own needs so as not to add more pressure to his life. 6 months after the divorce, Cyrus had found a new balance in his life. He had learned to be more cautious without becoming cynical, wiser, without losing his ability to trust the people who truly deserved his trust. Mom, he told me during one of our Sunday walks in the park, I want to thank you again for having the courage to show me the truth. I know it was difficult for you to decide whether to intervene or not. Son, I replied, a mother must always protect her children, even when it hurts. My job is not just to love you, but also to make sure the people you say you love truly deserve you. The grocery store cashier, a man named Rufus, also became an unexpected but welcome presence in our lives. One day, he came to visit me to ask how things had turned out, and we ended up talking for hours about the importance of speaking up when we see injustices, even if it is uncomfortable to do so. You know, Mrs. Marjorie Penn, Rufus told me. Before he left, my mother went through a similar situation years ago, and no one had the courage to tell her the truth. When everything was finally discovered, she had already lost all her life savings. That is why I decided to talk to you. Some truths hurt, but silence hurts more. Now, when I look back on everything that happened, I feel a mix of pain for what my son had to suffer, but also a deep pride for the strength he showed in facing the truth and making the right decisions. I learned that true family love sometimes requires the courage to speak difficult truths, to confront uncomfortable situations, and to protect the people we love, even when it means destroying illusions they prefer to keep. That day when I heard those strange words at the grocery store and decided to observe instead of ignore, I changed the course of our lives forever. It was one of the most difficult decisions I have ever made, but also one of the most correct. Today, Cyrus is a wiser, stronger man who is more aware of his own worth. He is no longer the victim of professional manipulators, but someone who has learned to set healthy boundaries and to value his own generosity enough not to allow it to be exploited. And I, Marjorie Penn, at 69 years old, learned that it is never too late to be brave, to stand up for what is right, and to protect those we love. Because in the end, the most powerful justice is not the one that shouts, but the one that acts with wisdom and protects those we love most. 2 years have passed since that afternoon at the grocery store that changed our lives forever. As I write these lines, sitting in my favorite armchair with a cup of tea that is already getting cold, I cannot help but reflect on all the ground we have covered since then. Cyrus got married again 6 months ago. His new wife, Selma, is a hard-working and honest woman he met at his office. What I like most about her is not only her transparency in everything she does, but the way she respects the relationship I have with my son. She has never tried to interfere between us or shown the slightest interest in our family finances. The first time Selma came to my house for dinner, she brought the ingredients for us to cook together. Marjorie, she told me as we prepared the vegetables, I want you to know that I will never ask you or Cyrus for money. I believe in working for what I need and being honest about what I can afford. Her words moved me to tears, not only for her honesty, but because I realized how traumatized I had been by the experience with Dahlia. For months after the divorce, every time we met someone new, I would find myself analyzing their motivations and looking for signs of manipulation. The healing process was not easy for either of us. Cyrus went through periods of depression where he questioned his judgment in relationships. There were nights when he would call me, asking if he could ever fully trust anyone again. Mom, he would tell me during those late-night calls, how can I be sure I will not be deceived again? How can I distinguish between someone who truly loves me and someone who only sees opportunity? Those conversations broke my heart because I saw how Dahlia's betrayal had damaged not only his finances, but also his fundamental ability to trust people. But I was also proud to see how he was slowly rebuilding his confidence in a more mature and wiser way. During the first year after the divorce, Cyrus developed what he called his verification system. Before helping anyone financially, he would ask to see documentation, talk to multiple sources, and take time to evaluate the consistency of the stories they told him. At first, I thought he might have become too distrustful. But over time, I realized that he had simply learned to balance his generous nature with a practical wisdom he had not had before. He no longer gave money out of emotional impulse, but only after a careful and rational evaluation. This new approach served him well when a coworker asked him for help for a supposed family emergency. Instead of sending money immediately, Cyrus asked to see medical documents and spoke directly to the hospital mentioned. It turned out that the story was false, and his coworker was trying to get money for gambling. "Mom," he told me after discovering that lie 2 years ago, "I would have sent the money without asking a single question." Now I understand that verifying is not distrusting. It is protecting yourself from people who seek to take advantage of the kindness of others. For my part, I also had to process my own feelings about what had happened. For months, I felt guilty for having waited so long to say something, wondering how much money we could have saved if I had acted sooner. But with time and perspective, I came to understand that I had acted at the right time. When I had finally gathered enough evidence to be truly convincing, the grocery store cashier, who had initially alerted me to the situation, became a dear and trusted friend to our family. Rufus and his wife Trudy visit us regularly now, and we have developed a genuine friendship based on shared values of honesty, mutual support, and compassion. You know, Marjorie Rufus told me during one of his visits, "What I admire most about this whole situation is the way you handled the truth. Many people would have made a scene, yelled, or sought revenge, but you simply presented the facts and allowed the truth to do its own work." His words made me reflect on something important I had learned throughout this painful process, that silent dignity is far more powerful than noisy or destructive revenge. I never sought to hurt Dahlia or her family. I simply stopped allowing them to continue hurting us. Gladys, the neighbor, who had given me additional information about Dahlia's family, also became a close friend. She helped me realize that what we had gone through was not unusual, that many families suffer this type of manipulation, especially when the children are generous and trusting by nature. My son-in-law works in social services, Gladys told me during one of our conversations, and he explained to me that these kinds of family scams are more common than most people think. There are those who have turned the manipulation of kind-hearted relatives into nothing less than a way of life. This perspective helped me understand that we had not been particularly naive or foolish. We had simply been targets of people who were experienced at exploiting emotions and family ties. The financial impact of the deception was undeniably significant, but still manageable. Cyrus calculated that in total we had lost around $15,000 when my contribution and some loans he had made, which were never returned, were included. However, once the flow of money to that family stopped, our financial situation improved dramatically. With the money he no longer had to send monthly, Cyrus was able to save for a down payment on a small house. He even asked me to live with him and Selma, but I preferred to maintain my independence in my own apartment, although now, with better furniture and appliances that he insisted on buying for me. Mom Cyrus told me when he brought the new refrigerator for years, "I watched you count coins while I sent hundreds of dollars to people who did not actually need them. Now it is your turn to finally have the things you deserve." Selma turned out to be not only a good wife to Cyrus, but also a truly considerate daughter-in-law to me. She never tries to compete with my place in my son's life and always includes me warmly in her family plans and decisions. The difference from Dahlia's cold and calculating attitude is so marked that sometimes I still find it difficult to believe both women existed in the same world. Last month, Selma confided that they are expecting their very first child. The news filled me with a pure joy I had not felt in many years. This grandson or granddaughter will grow up in a home where honesty and integrity are fundamental values, completely different from the environment of lies and manipulation that would have existed if Cyrus had remained with Dahlia. I want our child to know you as the grandmother who had the courage to protect our family, Selma told me while holding my hand with sincerity. Cyrus has told me the whole story, and I deeply admire what you did. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if I had never decided to hide behind those trash dumpsters to watch Wendell. How long would the deception have continued? Would Cyrus have eventually discovered the truth on his own, or would he have continued to be exploited indefinitely? I will probably never know the answers to those questions, but what I do know is this: the courage to face uncomfortable truths is one of the most important responsibilities we have toward the people we love. In these 2 years, I have reflected deeply on the signs I ignored for far too long. The small details that never quite added up, the overly convenient explanations, the way Dahlia always had a perfect excuse ready for every situation. Now I understand that my maternal instinct had been quietly trying to alert me for months, whispering truths that I simply chose not to hear. But I silenced those doubts because I did not want to create conflict, because I thought keeping peace was more important than raising uncomfortable questions. I have now learned that maintaining family peace should never come at the cost of allowing a family to be exploited and drained. Sometimes the greatest act of love is to create the very conflict that becomes necessary to protect the people who matter most. Today, at 69 years old, I feel wiser and stronger than I have felt in decades, not only because I helped save my son Cyrus from a destructive situation, but because I proved to myself that it is never too late to be brave, to stand up for what is right, and to shield those we love from harm. This experience taught me that true strength is not about avoiding problems, but about facing them with dignity and resolve when necessary. It reminded me that sometimes the most difficult decisions are also the most correct ones, even if their full meaning can only be appreciated with the slow passage of time. As I finish writing these reflections, I can hear Cyrus and Selma laughing together in the kitchen, preparing the Sunday dinner we will soon share. The sound of their voices, warm and light-hearted, fills the house with a sense of peace I once thought we had lost forever. It is the sound of a genuine family, one built on solid foundations of honesty, loyalty, and mutual respect. That sound is worth more than all the thousands of dollars we lost during the years of deception, and it will always be priceless to me. Because in the end, the most valuable thing we possess is not the money we can give or the possessions we can show, but the authentic relationships we nurture and protect. And no one can ever take those away from us. Reading and even sharing Reddit revenge stories can be a reminder that many others have walked similar painful roads. But what matters most is what we choose to do with the lessons afterward. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent for the sake of peace, or would you have found the courage to confront the truth, even at the risk of breaking illusions? I truly want to hear your thoughts and personal experiences. Please share them in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, I encourage you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Remember to turn on the notification bell so you do not miss more stories like this one. At the end of this video, you will see a link to another story that I am deeply proud of, one that carries lessons just as powerful. Thank you sincerely for your support, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.